State your full name, age, date of birth, and the youngest grandson wants to know how tall you are.
I'm Iris Elizabeth Reed. I'm 63. My birthday is March 16th, 1953. And Garrett, I'm 5'6½".
Where were you born?
At Quonset Point Naval Base in North Kingston, Rhode Island, where my dad was in service.
Where are your ancestors originally from?
My dad's mother, Elizabeth May Taylor Griffith, came from Scotland. My other ones came from Canada. My mom claims Indian ancestry.
Do you know anything about your family's surname?
Well, I'm told that Griffith is a Welsh name.
When did you meet Grandpa Poppy?
I met him on a blind date the day after high school graduation with my girlfriend Carol and Grandpa Poppy's cousin, Steve Friesen.
When did you meet Grandpa John?
Oh, I met Grandpa John at a square dance in 1992, I believe.
What was your first wedding like?
It was a beautiful wedding in the Methodist Church on June 17th, 1972.
What was your second wedding like?
It was on July 29th, 2000 at Walnut Hill Methodist Church, the church that we danced in a beautiful chapel wedding, and Daniel walked me down the aisle. My mom was in attendance along with your mother and Grandpa John's son and daughter-in-law.
Who was the maid of honor at your first wedding?
Linda Heyman, my best friend.
Who was the maid of honor at your second wedding?
Your mom.
What are the names of your children and why did you name them that?
Well, your mom is Rebecca Lynn Keels Osborne, and my dad's family had a tradition of giving Elizabeth the middle name of the oldest grandchild. When your mom was born, all grandparents and great-grandparents were living, so I had to come up with a name that would be just as beautiful. And it was Rebecca, not a Becky. And then Daniel was named after his dad. His original name was to have been Eric Lee. And his grandfather, your great-grandpa Keels, was a very short man. Daddy Shorty was his nickname. And he said when he found out that we were what the baby's name was going to be if it was a boy, and we said Eric, and he said, no, you can't name him Eric. And because we respected him, we didn't even ask why. And I wanted to name him Daniel after his dad. So we went with Daniel Jackson Keels. It was never determined as to whether he would be a junior or a second, so it was left at that. We later found out why you couldn't name him Eric. He'd known an Eric in school, and he was the meanest little boy in school.
What was the most unusual thing your children did on a regular basis when they were small?
Oh my. might be for other children, but my children listened, and when I asked them to do something, they did it right then.
What is the most difficult thing about being a parent?
Losing a child.
What are the names of your grandchildren?
Oh, Sean, Sarah, Gavin, Garrett, and Cooper.
Do you have any advice for your grandchildren about being a parent?
Oh, look to the Lord. Look to your mom and dad, to your grandparents, your brother.
What are the names of your parents and a quick description about them?
Oh, my dad is Robert Franklin Griffith. Franklin was his father's name. And he was very proud. He was proud of his children. And he raised me to know that when I grew up and left home, I could be responsible for myself. My mom is Phyllis May Robidoux Griffith. She inherited her grandmother's middle name of May. She is I'll back up to say she was a wonderful wife to my dad, a wonderful mom to me, my brothers and sisters, and she's a friend. She's a wonderful cook, phenomenal seamstress, and I'm proud every moment to say she's my mom.
Where is your dad buried?
My dad is buried in Buffalo Cemetery in Buffalo, Minnesota, with my sister Carol and my brother Gary.
Who are your aunts and uncles?
Well, on my dad's side, he has 3 sisters. The oldest is Frances Castle. It was my dad, Robert. His given name was Robert. And his younger sister, Judith. Aunt Judy is the only living relative. My grandparents and her brother and 2 sisters have passed away. On my mom's side, she is the second oldest. She had an older brother, John, and my mom, Phyllis, a brother, Dwayne, who lives in Pensacola, Florida, a brother, Donald, that just passed away, that lived in Villard, Minnesota, a brother, Ronnie, who lives in Villard, Minnesota, who used to farm with his mom and dad on the family farm. And then my mom has a sister, Audrey Halberg, who lives with her husband in Kensington, Minnesota, and they are retired farmers. My dad lived a lot of different places, but my mom lived in Villard, Minnesota on a farm, and she and my dad met when he would come and visit his cousin who lived on an adjacent farm.
What are the names of your grandparents?
My dad's parents are, it's Franklin. I'll have to find out his middle name, but it's Franklin Griffith. My grandmother was Elizabeth May. Her given name was Taylor Griffith. My mom's father was John McLaurin Robidoux. My mom's mother was Iris May Walburn Robidoux. Thus, from my two grandmothers, I've been given my name, being the oldest grandchild on my mom's side of the family. So it's Iris Elizabeth Griffith, of which I carry proudly.
What are the names of your siblings?
Oh, well, I'm the oldest. Iris Elizabeth, then my wonderful sister, Linda Louise Griffith Gavanda, a brother that I lost in his early 20s in a motorcycle accident, Gary Robert Griffith, and then I lost a sister, Carol May Griffith, at age 7 in a tragic bike accident. And then I have wonderful twin brothers that bring up the rear, and it's Frank is the oldest, Frank Robert Griffith, and my brother John Robert Griffith. All boys have their dad's name.
Where have you lived?
Well, I was born in Rhode Island on the naval base there, Quonset Point. From there, we moved to Minnesota, where my folks had come from. My dad attended the University of St. Paul for agriculture, thinking that he was going to be an ag teacher, but became quite a salesman. My dad loved to talk and visit, and went with probably other insurances as well. But after my dad graduated from college, was during the end of my year in kindergarten. We moved to Decorah, Iowa for the summer, and by first or second grade we moved to Carroll, Iowa, Carroll, then on to Rock Rapids, Iowa, where we lived for a while. And we moved out in the country, not too far in the northwest corner of Iowa. It was a community outside of Rock Rapids, for the worst snowstorm in Iowa's history. We'll remember that well for the snow, but also for the fact that I had what we thought was whooping cough for 2 weeks, the 2-week measles, and then 2 weeks of recovery, and only missed a half a day of school. And then we moved into a small community of Hull, Iowa, which was a part of was a Dutch community. And they believed that you were in church on Sundays. And we wondered why everybody, when we lived in Rock Rapids, Iowa, came over from the other town to visit, was because you could not have a picnic in Hull, Iowa. And we had many dear friends there. And from there we moved to Faribault, where my dad must have taken a more prestigious job in sales by where we were living, and was maybe home just a little bit more. And that's the year that Frank and John were born. And that was on the south side of town. When I was in 7th grade, we moved to the other side of town, and my folks bought their first home when I was in 7th grade, and that's where I lived until I graduated from high school. When I was married, and then moved to Minneapolis and lived with your Grandpa Poppy. We lived there for a year, and then he graduated. And a week before he graduated, your mom was born. Your great-grandpa and Grandma Keels and your let's see, great grandpa and grandma Keels and his parents, Mama Lucy and Daddy Shorty, came up for Grandpa Poppy's graduation from Northwestern Electronics Institute and moved us back in a terrible storm of rain. On a Friday, we arrived in Texas, crossing the Red River, looking out the side windows. Came into Dallas, Texas, around 5:30 in the pouring down rain, and we're in the far right-hand lane, thinking that that's how we would exit to come up to Plano. And here it is, a left-hand exit. And here we are, 2 vehicles pulling 2 U-Hauls, 5:30 rush hour traffic of Dallas, crossing the road. And God certainly had us, because we made it. And we arrived at Aunt Helen and Uncle Marion's in Plano, Texas on a Friday night in the rain, and they were going to a football game. Welcome to Friday Night Lights in Texas.
Who influenced your life the most?
I would say my mom and dad, my dad's mother, my grandpa and grandma Robidoux had great influence on me, that I was with them a lot of my summers. My Uncle Ronnie, my mom's youngest brother, who was like a big brother to me when I'd go up and visit on the farms, and I oftentimes tagged along with him.
What is your earliest memory?
Oh, I had been, and I can't remember much after that, sequencing in time, but I came home with my grandpa and grandma Robidoux. I'd been up to their home. I can't remember much before then, but my mom came home from the hospital with this new baby. I was not happy. Where did this baby come from, and why was she coming to my house?
What is your best memory?
Oh. I have so many wonderful memories. I remember my wedding days. I remember your mother's wedding. I remember your mom graduating. Or your mom's birth, your Uncle Daniel's birth. A proud moment. Uncle Daniel gave me a run for my money. In school, he was as smart. Your mom worked hard to know, and she excelled as a student. And if Uncle Daniel was very much like my brother Gary, whom we will oftentimes think of Uncle Daniel, and would you just give us a little advice here, was my brother Gary. Oh my goodness, he gave my folks grief. Uncle Daniel didn't give us so much grief, but he wasn't so much on having to study. But a proud moment was that, and I had spent a week in school. He couldn't figure out how to hand in his homework. He'd gone to a social. A grading period had come out, and he had forged my signature. And the math teacher, who knew his mother, who knew his mother, me, that had your mother, and she was fairly certain that I would have been calling up to the school to find out how come he'd had a 53 in math, and I'd signed off with no questions asked. Yeah, he bought himself a mother for school. Teachers couldn't figure out how to get this child straightened out. was coming to help. So when his final exam came that year for math, he and another friend sat in class and didn't get to leave until they had had it all corrected. She couldn't tell him whether it was right or wrong. But if it wasn't enough to pass her class, she wasn't letting him go home. Because she didn't need him there again next year.
What was fashionable clothing when you were young?
Well, living in Minnesota, we were usually a couple years behind California where the trend setting happened. The outfit that Hannah had on today, that little baby doll outfits, short minis, although mine were always fairly conservative in length, above my knee. Colors, bright colors.
Where did you go to elementary school?
Well, as I told you, I lived in a lot of different places, but the University of Minnesota's kindergarten, they had an individual building that we were bused to. And then I don't think I went to elementary in Decorah, Iowa. I don't remember the school there. But I distinctly remember first and second grade in Carroll, Iowa. Third grade would have been in Rock Rapids, Iowa. Fourth grade was in a small, rural, like what you see on some of the old-fashioned movies, because we had a little heater and like a two or three room building for fourth grade. Fifth grade. We must have been, I can't remember fifth grade. But I remember sixth grade was in Faribault, Minnesota for sixth grade, and then seventh and through high school was in Faribault.
Where did you go to high school, and what was your school's mascot?
Oh, it was the Falcon in Faribault, Minnesota.
What activities did you do in high school?
Schooling. Well, I was limited in athletic sports. In high school I didn't play because in sixth grade, earlier grades was before President Kennedy had come out with the physical fitness testing that you kids take for granted that you do. But sixth grade, we'd moved to the new community, and I was a new girl on the block and was about to outrun the track star on the boys' team. Got within a few yards of the end and couldn't breathe, which we would now known as athletically induced asthma, but had no idea back then. So I would go into coughing spells in order to be able to breathe, and several times landed up in the emergency room. So there was to be no running. I could walk, but that's why I don't run. But I enjoyed soccer, volleyball, basketball. Basketball was more running than I could do, but certainly volleyball.
What was your best subject in school?
Home economics.
What was your worst subject in school?
Well, probably English. I didn't like to read, or I didn't read too much.
What was your first job?
Well, I babysat, making 25 cents an hour. My first job outside of babysitting was at the local hospital, medical hospital, as a serving serving meals to employees, and then cleaning up in the kitchen. We wore white uniforms. From there, went to cashiering at a local grocery store. My senior year in high school, I was the top salesperson for Fuller Brush sales, door-to-door sales.
What was your best job?
That would have been it. That was, I'm a born salesperson. But when, are you going to be asking me about where I went, what school I selected?
No.
Okay. Well, I went, when we were growing up, or people want to know, what is it that you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be a wonderful wife and mother, and then a grandmother, and in between there, a nanny for children. Because of the love that I had seen in my grandmother and my mom.
What was your worst job?
Well, whatever it was, I didn't stay there that long because I enjoy what I do. My worst job. Worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Worked with the school district. I guess my worst job was going to school to become a nurse. And then I realized that I was going to have to work every other weekend. And I wouldn't be home on holidays if I was scheduled to work. Got as far as the psychiatric in school. I was 3 months out from being graduating and said, this is not what I want to do for my life. And I had beat out people with much higher intelligence, but because of my love for people and to be that wonderful wife and mother, I would do anything to provide for my family if something were to happen.
What is your greatest achievement in life so far?
Well, I consider myself to have been a wonderful wife. To your Grandpa Poppy, to John. I consider myself a wonderful mother. To your mom and to Daniel. And now I'm a grandmother to you and Cooper. I don't see much of Sarah and Sean, but I know they are doing well. They see their dad. They live with their mom and their new stepdad. They have other grandparents that love on them as well. And I am to them a phone call away as well.
What do you wish to accomplish before you die?
To continue to make a difference in lives. In your life, Garrett's life, Cooper's life, most definitely your mother's.
If you could change one thing in modern society, what would it be?
Probably texting. Talk to people. You can hear more in somebody's voice than you'll ever see in their words.
What do you miss about the good old days?
Well, I don't know. When I was growing up in the summertime, we'd go barefoot. From the time we got out of school until 2 weeks before we went back to school, so that if we had stubbed our toes or something, they would be healed over so that we could get shoes back on. That's why other than the concrete down here gets too hot and you got to put on shoes.
What was it like living through the wars and civil rights movements?
Through the war, well, having lived in Minnesota and Iowa, there were no African Americans until I moved to Minneapolis. we had more of a Hispanic migratory workers that came, living through the era of the Vietnam War. It was a case that Grandpa Poppy and I did not as well support. And had his number come up to be drafted, we'd have probably gone to Canada. But I certainly support those that did go. And again, when it is an engaged war, the Vietnam War was never about us. We had maybe no business being there, but those that went gave their lives. How did the Middle East War affect me? When wasn't in 2000 anyway, my brother Frank was in the Navy and was on board ship, and we did not know where he was. We were very concerned for his safety. But he has assured us that he will never be in harm's way. And that's my concern now with the wars that are going on.
What were your thoughts after Kennedy got assassinated?
We had just come home from my great-grandmother's funeral, small funeral, and went up to the school to get my homework. Kids were running out from school. I did not know when I went up to the school. That's where I was in 5th grade. That was the year that Kennedy was assassinated. And was going into school to get homework on a Friday, and school was being let out. Kennedy had been assassinated, and it was as well as the earth could stand still.
What was your favorite nursery rhyme as a kid?
Hi diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle.
When did you first fly on an airplane?
Well, I think it was to Minneapolis. Your mom would not have been 2. I was pregnant with Uncle Daniel, and we were going to go and visit my mom and dad.
What were your thoughts about flying on the plane?
Oh, that wasn't the first time I flew. The first time I flew, your mother was 3 months old. I had driven up. My grandpa Robert had passed away in South Texas. My mom and her brother had come down to get my grandmother, and I drove back with them so that I could go to the service. And I flew with your mom in arms, 3 months old, into the opening day of DFW Airport. And we had no idea what gate, what terminal, and your grandpa certainly didn't know where he was going to be picking us up because it kept changing all the time. I had no apprehension about flying, but I had your mom in my arms.
What was your first car, and when did you get it?
Well, it wasn't necessarily mine, but the first car that I got to drive with my learning permit was a 1959 Chevrolet with great big wings in the back.
When did you first have running water in your house?
I've always had running water in the house.
So did you always have electricity in the house?
We always had electricity in the house.
What about a TV?
We always had a TV, but I can remember when we got our color TV.
When was that?
That was in 6th grade.
What was your favorite TV show as a kid?
Here Come the Monkeys.
Who were your best friends in school?
Well, because we moved a lot, in one of the smaller communities that we lived in, it was Carol Reavers. And when we moved to Faribault, it was Debbie Hall and Barbara Olson. I'm still in contact with Barbara Olson and several other friends from high school. The lady that was my maid of honor, Linda Heyman, I'm still in contact with her. But it was hard growing up and moving and maintaining those relationships. And then coming to Texas.
Who are your best friends now?
Sandy Klein. Yeah. Friends from square dancing. Your mom. Family. Family, because no matter what's going on, I'm a phone call away. Any out time. The Hannigans, I've made a big difference in their lives as well.
Did you and your friends have a special hangout? What was the name of it, and what did you do there?
Well, when we were in 7th grade, we lived on Central Avenue, which was the main street of town. On Friday nights, we'd go to the football games, and then we'd come and we had a home with pillars that went out, and you could sit there. And the guys that were older than us would circle down, and every so often they'd come down a little bit further down past our street because you couldn't just make the loop of driving around through town. And yeah, the girls and I would like to hang out at my house on the front steps. And we were fine until we called into the radio station, requested a song, and my dad was listening to the same radio station. He thought it best that we come in the house. Yeah. But I love to dance, love to go to school dances. Always enjoyed dancing.
What's your favorite trip you've taken?
There I am blessed. I've done so many soccer trips with your mom. The privilege of watching. I did not go to Russia when she did that trip because I would not deny her going and made every opportunity for her going, but could not go into a Soviet country because of the freedoms that we enjoy here in our country. But Grandpa John and I did trips to out east. We flew into Boston. That's when I remember having that we'd rented a convertible, and we would be gone for my birthday and Christmases. It would be one trip a year, and going through the fall foliage up there, through Boston, along the coast, up to Bar Harbor, Maine, Vermont, New York. I've been to West Point. I've been to Annapolis. Soccer trips, I've toured Washington, D.C. My folks had been to Alaska, and my dad said he was so glad that he'd come back through Canada and Lake Louise afterwards because he'd have been disappointed in Alaska if they had gone that way. So I asked John if we could go to Canada. We flew into Calgary, went down to Banff, stayed in the Banff Springs Hotel, on up to Lake Louise, and stayed for Grandpa's birthday in the Chateau, the Grand Hotel. And they found out that it was his birthday and that I personally made the arrangements, not through a travel agent, and they had us overlooking the lake and then canoeing on that lake. and then going on up to Jasper. Grandpa John and I went to Yellowstone, then down to Bryce, the Grand Canyon, over to Zion. This last year out to San Diego. I went as a 16-year-old for 3 weeks to San Francisco. And then I'd wanted Grandpa John and I to do the Alaskan cruise, but I had the privilege of going with my mom.
If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Well, I went with my mom and sister to Scotland, and this year on January 30th, I'm going to the last state. I've been to all other 49. I'm going to Hawaii.
What church did you go to as a child?
The Methodist Church.
When did you become a Christian?
Well, having grown up in the Methodist Church, you went to confirmation class. And I was before I was 6, probably 13. Probably 13, truly understood, but it isn't, as you know, through your faith. Your grandpa and I've always believed in God and Jesus as my Savior, but it was through a revival at the First Christian Church here in Plano, Texas, that I came forward and pronounced my faith and had been baptized as an infant, but was baptized then. And then after Grandpa John passed away, I realized that I needed to have a closer walk to God and started attending Prestonwood. And there came to pronounce, or to give my faith. And the Sunday that I walked forward was the same day that Daniel Sewell had walked forward to pronounce his faith. Another little one that I've certainly touched in their lives. And then was rebaptized again by a very dear pastor friend.
Is there anything that you would like to let your grandchildren and future great-grandchildren know?
No matter how hard it is, God will see you through. Get down on your knees and give it to Him. God will see you through. I have made more lemonades and I have fought more prayers. I have known that I could do a lot of things. But the moment I gave it to God, He wraps me up and takes care of me. He did that when Grandpa John had been diagnosed with cancer. And yet it's so hard with the loss of Uncle Daniel. And when it's my deepest and darkest, I don't ask God why. I ask God for strength to lead me through. I don't feel at any time that it was tragic, and how much, that much more, you have got to reach out. You've got to let people know when you're hurting someone, because Uncle Daniel did not reach out. We knew. His friend David knew. I had spent a week with him in their home. Your mom had reached out to him. He had reached out to your mom. But it's that one split second. And that's what I want. When we ask you to make sure you wear a helmet, when we make sure you've got your seatbelts on, no drinking and driving, obey the laws, live a good life. You don't have to be expensively educated, but be well educated in what you want to do. Enjoy life. Be happy. Take time for family and friends. And love the ones you're with. Be happy in life. Be with me on Christmas Eve services. It really does make a difference.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.